I'm just about to get up. It's 7 o'clock. The alarm clock has rung. Oh, I think, you can still allow yourself 5 minutes. And suddenly my husband is standing at the foot of the bed and says to me, I have to go now, and thank you for everything. Then he was gone.
Frau Gödrich, Sie waren beruflich Bankkauffrau.
Ms. Gödrich, you were a banker by profession, for many years also active in environmental policy, and you were and are an author. You've written essays, short stories, novels, and most recently a booklet entitled The Other Reality When the Deceased Show Themselves. In it you describe, as a person who has always had both feet fully in life, encounters with your deceased father, also after-death contacts with your husband, as well as haunting phenomena. Let's start with Chapter 1, which you gave the title, A Deceased Person as a Spiritual Healer. It was about an operation scheduled for you at that time. Please tell us what exactly happened.
I was about to have an operation, and I was very scared of it. I was told that when I woke up after the operation, I would be in the intensive care unit because I had to be checked. And I was told to take my toilet bag with me. It was put on my bed, and then I was taken to the anteroom of the operating theatre. So I was really scared, and I had already had an injection. I was lying in bed with my eyes closed, and suddenly my father was standing next to my bed. And he said, "My eldest child, it's very easy to relax. You just mustn't be afraid of dying." I thought it was easy for him to say that because he was never afraid of dying. I remembered that once, after an operation, he had noticed in the night that a thrombus in his leg had come loose and was moving towards his heart. He woke my mother and told her to stay calm, call the doctor and tell him he had a thrombus, that he would know what to bring. While he was waiting for the doctor, he calmly explained to my mother all the things she would have to do if he died. So just saying, "Just don't be afraid of dying," I thought that was really strange, but it was typical of him. And then I asked myself, how did he get here in the first place? It was quite clear to me that I was lying here in the anteroom to the operating theatre, so my father couldn't suddenly appear here, it was obvious. Maybe he put on a doctor's coat so as not to be noticed here. And then I remembered, oops, he died last year. And then I thought, I don't care about that now. It's good that he's here. And then he said, I want to help you. And then, how is that supposed to work if you don't relax? That's what he said. I was puzzled. What did he mean? Before I knew, he probably meant anesthesia. He continued, imagine you're lying on a sieve. For heaven's sake, where was I going to get such a big sieve to lie on? I thought of an enlarged salad colander, but there I would have to lie in a crook, and I found that uncomfortable. And then I thought of a compost sieve and thought, that's big, I could lie on it, but it would have to be clean. It would have to be a new compost sieve. And then he was already saying, your body is filled with sand. Yes, well, then I filled my body with sand. And then he followed up, all the way to your fingertips. Can you feel that? Yes, well, then I filled my fingertips with sand. And because I wanted to do it really well, I also filled the tips of my toes with sand. I think he noticed that I had finished. Then he said, "Now open your pores and let the sand slide under you." I did this. The sand trickled out of me, and I felt lighter and lighter. Finally, I saw the fine yellow sand beneath me, replicating my body in a rough outline. Then I was so relieved. Done, I thought. I have achieved outer relaxation. The rest is blotted out for me. I knew nothing more. Then all I knew was that someone shook me. "Wake up, wake up." It was the nurse who woke me up. Then I realized that I was in a normal hospital room. And then I said, "Haven't I had an operation? I was supposed to be in intensive care." She said, "Everything went so well with you, it really wasn't necessary." And then I remembered that my father was there and calmed me down before the operation. I just said very quietly, "Thanks, Dad."
So you followed your father's apparent suggestions with confidence.
Yes.
Had you also experienced him like this during his lifetime, in such a way that he accompanied you?
Not so directly. I only met my father when I was 7. He was in the war and then in captivity. But my father could hypnotize. He was a very, very strong personality with an incredible power of suggestion. When he was a prisoner of war in England, he discovered that he had the gift of influencing people to do what he wanted them to do. Even through parties, hypnotized people, mentally sent them into the desert so that they sweated, or made them eat onions thinking it was an apple. He also healed. He could really relieve people of their pain and remove body deformities. But we as children had nothing to do with it. We hardly knew him then. He only came home at the end of 1946, when I was already 7 years old. Then he tried to earn his living by hypnosis, was always travelling and only at home when he wasn't giving lectures. In addition, my mother and her family had nothing to do with this profession. They were rather hostile to hypnosis. After the currency reform, when people no longer had so much money for lectures and had to save, he gradually gave up the profession and went back to the office where he had originally worked.
Did you also have an after-death contact with your father before this operation?
Never, never. And I didn't have any more later either. That was unique.
And you attribute your particularly successful healing to your father?
Yes. Of course, the healing is also thanks to the doctors. They came to see me every morning. The head doctor came with a whole swarm, and they checked how I was doing. The head doctor would then always say, "And here we're dealing with a storybook healing." That bothered me somehow. I thought, now the doctors are attributing all the success to themselves, but my father also played a part in it. I said, yes, because my father, who was already passed away, came to see me before the operation and did relaxation exercises with me. That's why I'm doing so well now. They looked at me as if to say, "Oh God, the poor woman, you can't see the mental damage on her." And I realized, oh dear, now I have to be careful. I was so happy, but you couldn't say that. Otherwise you might be considered mentally ill.
Another chapter of your book has as its title the question, can a deceased man muck out the rabbit hutch? Can he?
Yes, probably. Yes, it's crazy. 9 years after that experience, my husband died of a heart attack. My husband was not a relaxed person, but rather an uptight person. He was terribly afraid of dying and of getting older, because that brings death closer, which took away his joy of life. He died in hospital of a heart attack. But I wasn't sensitive enough to notice that at the moment he was dying. My daughter and I were called to the hospital when he was already dead. Then it was business as usual. We let people know, we cried, we prepared the funeral. The next day, after the funeral, I went shopping in the morning and also to the bank. The will was in the safe deposit box. You need it to go to the office. At some point I was back home and wondered if I had taken the safe deposit box key out of the safe deposit box. I went into the bedroom, looked, and it wasn't there. Then I searched everything, my jackets, my trousers, my pockets, my shopping bag. The key was gone. Then I went again, looked, took the other keys out of the case, put them next to each other on the bedside table. There should be 4, and I only saw 3. The key was gone. Good, so what was I supposed to do next? Then I called the shops. Has a key been found? And so on. Nothing, nothing. After about 2 hours, I go back and check. The key was in the case. There were all 4. I thought, this can't be. My husband sometimes played silly tricks like that on me. Can't be that my late husband hid the safe key so that I had to look for it. There's no such thing. Dying is a serious thing. You don't fool around like that. But then I let it go and walked the dogs. I had 2 dogs at that time. I was quite late because of the key hunt. Then I went to the rabbit that lived on the balcony, a little dwarf rabbit that had belonged to my husband. A child had given him the rabbit because he could no longer take care of it. But I didn't want the rabbit. I said, we have 2 big dogs, what will we do with the rabbit? And then my husband said he would do everything himself. He would take care of him. So that was always his job. And that day, I'd been looking after the bunny all week. I went out onto the balcony and wanted to apologize to the bunny for having to wait so long for a clean cage and for food. Then I saw that the rabbit's hutch was already clean. This couldn't be true. I reached into the litter. It was all airy and soft. After 30 or 36 hours, some of the corners should have been completely wet. I thought, did my husband do this somehow? Then I remembered that we had both once seen the film The Haunted Castle in Spessart with Lilo Pulver. In the film there were also ghosts who helped the Countess. And my husband jokingly said, when I'm dead, I'll help you too. That suddenly occurred to me. Had he perhaps mucked out the rabbit hutch to please me? That couldn't be true. I was completely confused. Could such a thing be possible or not? In any case, the rabbit was only missing food. That's what I gave it. As I said, I was so full of it that I thought about it all the time. Did I perhaps do this subconsciously? Might I have cleaned out the rabbit hutch at some point? But that couldn't be right. I would have given the rabbit food. My husband sometimes said to me that I was a food fanatic. Yes, that was true. I always made sure that the animals and the people who stayed with us had enough to eat. And I, of all people, was supposed to have forgotten to give the rabbit its food. Nah, even my subconscious wouldn't do that. It was just a crazy day.
Did you then also have direct after-death contact with your husband in the immediate aftermath?
Yes, I still have to say, the next morning my husband appeared to me live. I had not seen my father, but I saw my husband. It was just the day after what had happened with the rabbit hutch and the key. I was about to get up. The alarm clock had gone off. And I thought, well, you can allow yourself 5 more minutes. I thought, what are you doing today? You have to go back to the village. You have to go shopping. Will you go there or there first? How can you save time? And suddenly my thoughts were interrupted. Suddenly my husband was standing at the foot of the bed, and he said, I have to go now, and thank you for everything. A feeling of happiness came over me, the likes of which I had never experienced in my life. First, I had to calm down. And then I thought, now a deceased person has appeared to me again. And this time I had no anesthetic. I thought before that maybe it was related to the anesthetic. Now I didn't have any anesthetic. I didn't take any tablets either. I hadn't even had a glass of wine the night before. Nothing at all. So it couldn't have been a hallucination. He must have actually contacted me. And then I started thinking, comparing. What was it like the first time? What was it like the second time? With my father, it was very direct, so I couldn't distinguish whether he was really sitting next to me, next to the bed. He communicated with me. He knew exactly when I was ready for him to leave. But in this case, I had the impression that a fixed program had been prepared for me. The sentence was just waiting to be communicated to me. I really felt something switch over in my head. I heard that sentence and I saw my husband. I still have the image very clearly in my mind. I had a dark red interior and he was standing in front of it. I couldn't tell what he was wearing. He was dressed in bright colours. I only looked at his face. It looked very serious. On his deathbed, on the other hand, he had looked relaxed. So I thought, maybe it's very difficult to communicate with a living person. Maybe that's why he looked so serious and tense. Then it struck me. Wait a minute, he didn't move his mouth when he spoke. And the thought came to me, that couldn't have been a living spirit. I must have had an image in front of my eyes that I had received, that was forming in my head. I found that very exciting. I really noticed how my thoughts changed, how I suddenly received images and sounds. My thoughts were racing, that such a thing existed. It was clear to me that there must be a form of existence after death.
Was that then also the crucial point in your life from which you were convinced that there is life after death?
Yes, only then. During the first experience with my father, I still had my doubts. Well, you had the anaesthetic. You don't know what they gave you. Maybe there were some drugs in it, and you had hallucinations. But now I was sure it was a contact with the beyond.
You also report on a haunting phenomenon. What in particular do you remember about it?
Yes, I once experienced such a phenomenon. It had to do with my husband when he was still alive. It was something very strange. We were having a crisis at the time. It happens quite often that there is a crisis in a marriage. I always cooked hot meals in the evening. That evening we had fish, potatoes and spinach. I thought a good white wine would go well with it. My husband didn't like wine. He preferred milk or mineral water. But somehow I was a bit, he should just drink wine for once. On New Year's Eve he also toasted with champagne. So I put the wine glass on the table, set the table nicely and filled the glass half full. Then I started eating and said bon appétit. By the way, that was this table here. He sat at the narrow end and didn't move his chair any closer. He just stared at the table and at the wine glass. I could already feel how the air suddenly somehow became icy, as if it was suddenly thundering. Oh, I thought at first, will he get up now, get the mineral water himself? Will he ask me for it, or will he grumble that I didn't put it out for him? And suddenly, as if by magic, his glass moved very slowly upright and poured the contents onto the table. I was frightened out of my wits. I thought, this place is haunted. Fascinated, I looked. I'd once read a book by Fanny Moser about haunted phenomena. For God's sake, now we're haunted too. These are hauntings that can last for weeks. Then it struck me as strange. Then I thought, of all things, my husband's glass has been emptied, and so carefully too. If it had been a real haunting, the glass might have been thrown around. It certainly wouldn't have happened so carefully. And then I remembered that my husband had a great fear of broken glass. He would have associated broken glass on the dining table with mortal danger. The thing had to be connected with my husband. So I called out to him all excited and triumphant, "You are the spook." He just looked at me and asked me how I could think that. He couldn't have touched the glass. "Look, I can't reach it. I'm sitting so far away." "All right, but still." Then he didn't want to take it lying down and started making remarks. He wanted to prove that in a borderline situation, a glass can fall by itself. He filled the glass with water and made experiments. Where was the tipping angle? He found that there was a tipping angle, and from then on the glass fell a little faster. But the glass fell very slowly, very evenly, very slowly. I've never experienced anything like it. Now, in retrospect, I'm glad I saw something like that myself once. I then read literature about it. I later contacted the IGPP Institute in Freiburg. who recommended literature about that kind of phenomenon. I also read a book by Gödrich, and he describes such cases. He thinks that such events have to do with a focused person. So in this case, it would actually have had to do with my husband. He wanted to avoid shouting at me because he was afraid I might break up with him. Because I was quite angry with him by then. He then projected his tension, which must have been incredibly strong, onto the glass I put in front of him. It was probably really a psychosomatic reaction that was shifted to the outside.
That was the explanation for you?
Science explains it this way nowadays. And I agree with this explanation when I found it later.
You look back on a very colourful, diverse life. Acting in theatre, studying psychology, political involvement. What role has spirituality played in your life, and to what extent have you changed as a result of your experiences?
Those 3 cases remained the only ones. Twice dead people appeared to me, and once I witnessed psychokinesis. But I thought about it a lot. I read books, I looked for connections. I compared the 2 people who appeared to me. People often ask, what kind of people experience this kind of phenomenon? I think you should also ask, what were the people who appeared to you like? And I have to say that in both cases they were people who had the kind of great mental energy that normal people do not have. My father with his hypnosis, and my husband with his ability to influence physical objects. I recognize this connection. My husband probably caused the phenomena with the key in the rabbit hutch. These were also effects on matter. I therefore believe that the deceased take their abilities, especially their spiritual abilities, with them into their existence in the hereafter.
What is your attitude towards death today, towards the transiency of man?
I like living, but I'm no longer afraid of dying. Something catches you. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm almost a little curious.
Ms. Gödrich, thank you very much for the insights into your world of experience. All the best, and thank you very much for the interview.